program. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. In the first hour, we're going to spend our time talking about a pro-life witness and the issue of abortion. Next week will be the 45th anniversary of a decision that came down of Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton. And I might just mention that we won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but one of the articles I've posted here is by our good friend Robert Knight. Maybe we'll get him on next week, but we've posted his article, came out of the Washington Times, The Deceitful Road to Abortion. We may get into a little of that today, but we'll certainly talk more about that in the future, because indeed the whole decision about abortion was based on a series of lies, and that is really one of the reasons we want to focus some of our time and attention on that today, because we have in studio with us Don Blythe. Many of you perhaps already know who he is. If you are living in California or been familiar with the At the Well Ministries or his Project Truth that he does on campus, but he has been involved in ministry for 35 years and has really been somebody on the front lines on the pro-life movement, has saved thousands of babies, and certainly has a dynamic ministry. And so if you're not familiar with him, I am thrilled, Don, that you can be in studio with us today.
I love to be here. I have looked forward to this for years, to be able to just sit across from Kerby Anderson, one of my mentors. And so for me, this is just kind of a surreal moment. So
well, it is great for us, because every time I'm out in California with our good friends at KYCC, I get a chance to see you and many of your other friends and hear a lot of your ministry. And when you said you were going to be in Dallas, I said, before you go out of town, I want to put you on the program. And so here you are today. Let's see if we can, for just a minute, talk about how you developed this ministry, because you are really one of those individuals that has been on the front lines and really taken the pro-life message to these clinics. You've also taken the pro-life message to college campuses. So I really want to talk about all the different ministries, and it will take a whole hour probably to cover all of that. And then I want to hear some of the great stories, because you are a master storyteller as well. But how did you get started? I mean, some people will look at you and say, couldn't you have been doing something else? I'm sure you could. So how did this happen?
I was on my way to do something else.
Yeah.
I was at I was in a private small Christian college in Southern California back in the late 70s. And in the early 80s, I started traveling for the college as a field rep. And someone asked me if I'd ever seen a video called A Matter of Choice by Dr. Wilkie.
Yes.
And I said no. And they said, well, it's about abortion. I said, well, what about abortion? I didn't know anything about abortion. So I watched that documentary, and that documentary changed my life. It's a little bit hard to get a hold of now. I don't think it's out there and easily found. But that video, they actually interviewed both sides of the issue of abortion, the actual people, including Dr. Edward Allred, who owned a series of abortion clinics up and down the California coast. And when I actually saw them, he allowed the crew, the television crew, to come in and film him performing an abortion.
Wow.
And I was blown away. And I thought, surely we're not doing this to women and children. This is just beyond my imagination. And so that night in 1981 or 82, that really had an impact on my life. But I did what most good Christians do. I laid down till the feeling went away of anger towards abortion. And a couple years went by, and that video showed up again at my home church, Quail Lakes Baptist Church in Stockton. And again, that flame of anger towards abortion and frustration towards the insult to humanity that it was rekindled inside me. And then I stepped out by faith and started a ministry called At the Well Ministries. And I started going in front of abortion clinics in Northern California, talking with the couples that were going in. And all of a sudden I went, wow, they're actually listening to me, and they're actually taking my card that I got from a pregnancy help center, and they're going to the pregnancy help center, and they're saving their babies. And I thought, wow, this is something. How come we haven't been doing this? So in 1984, when I launched it, I'd never heard of a ministry called Sidewalk Counseling. Although not too long after that, I came across the book Who Broke the Baby by Sarah Garten. And what
a great book, too.
And that book had a big influence on me. And so I thought, wow, that's what that lady's doing, what I'm doing. I love that lady. So I contacted her and said, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? And a couple people that had been going out in front of the abortion clinic with some signs, they were a little bothered that I was, out there and talking to people. And one lady said, well, I'm going to ask my mentor whether or not you're doing it the right way. So she contacts her mentor, which was a man by the name of Joe Scheidler.
Oh, yes, and I know Joe, and he's been on the program, too, along with John Wilkie and all these people. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know who these people were, so I said, well, who's he? She goes, well, he's the man that I really respect. And so I said, well, what did he say when you told him the way I was approaching couples and talking to couples? She goes, he said you're doing it the right way, that you need to listen to Don. And I go, that's a good thing? She goes, yeah, so you're okay now. And then a few years later, I got to meet Joe Scheidler when he debated the college students at UC Davis.
Yes.
And so it just started snowballing, and I just started going around to different abortion clinics in Northern California. I actually got to challenge Edward Allred, who had inspired me, even though he didn't mean to go out. And they were doing abortions at abortion clinics in the Stockton, that whole general area, Modesto. They were doing abortions up to 6 months.
Yes, I know.
And so I started going out and talking people out of abortions and changing hearts and lives. One young lady, she and her 16-year-old boyfriend, they pulled into the abortion clinic, and they were sitting in their car, and I went over and I said, hi, can I give you some information? I said, I'm out here to try to help you save your baby and talk you out of ending your baby's life. And, well, we've made up our mind. And I said, please don't do this. I said, let me talk to you a little bit more. And she said, well, my parents would kill me if they found out I was pregnant. And I said, we all say that. Our parents will kill us. Your parents aren't going to kill you. They're going to be angry, and they have a right to be angry. But ending your baby's life isn't the answer. Your baby has a heartbeat. Your baby's alive. And I talked to him for about 15 minutes about it and challenged him. And finally, she looks up at her boyfriend and says, I think I want to go home. He goes, okay. So they left and they went home. And that was almost 30 years ago now. And not too long ago, I had breakfast in IHOP, and I sat across the table from a beautiful 30-year-old young lady with 2 children, and she and I had a bond that is unusual, but her mother was the one who was that 16-year-old girl, and she was actually this young girl who had grown up and now has children. She actually was the valedictorian of her high school. Wow. And I thought, wow, I saved a little baby who became the valedictorian of her high school. That's pretty cool. Well, we serve an awesome God. So that's what I did.
We have a lot more to talk about, but again, I think you have a little bit of understanding of At the Well Ministries. We're going to talk about Project Truth. We're going to talk a little bit more about this issue of abortion and pro-life identification and testimony and ministry. So we'll take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Don Blythe right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, with all this talk about fake news, you might think that this is a recent phenomenon. Jared Stepman provides a history of fake news in the United States and the attempts government and other entities have used to try to stop it. He reminds us that the Founding Fathers were well aware of the power of the press. Many of them, such as Samuel Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Paine, were newspapermen and pamphleteers. That is why they were all high on King George III's enemies list. 3 years after the Constitution was ratified, Congress added the Bill of Rights that included the First Amendment that provides protections for the press. They understood the power of the press. Benjamin Franklin explained that the press acted as a court of public opinion and wielded great power. But Thomas Jefferson also argued that the most effectual way for a people to be governed by reason and truth is to give freedom to the press. You know, early attempts to suppress fake news or unpopular opinions did not go well. The Federalist Party, for example, passed the infamous Alien and Sedition Acts under President John Adams in order to clamp down on false writing. It became so unpopular that the party was crushed in future elections and ceased to exist as a party. Now, there's a lesson for the Big Four tech masters in Silicon Valley, which I wrote about last month. For some time, they've argued that they were merely a platform and have no responsibility to evaluate what is posted on their sites. Now, some of them, like Facebook and Google, want to develop a way to fact-check stories and to limit the amount of fake news on the Internet. The founders gave us a free press unhindered by a government oversight that could censor or even modify news and information. Instead, they encouraged all of us to read widely and check out the facts. That is still the best approach for today. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talking today about abortion and pro-life ministry. Next week will be the 45th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. I have a commentary coming out on Monday, and if you don't have my commentaries, you certainly can get the commentary that we have posted today, and it all is about the history of fake news, really going all the way back to the need for us to look at lots of sources of information and evaluate that with discernment. And really, when you come to this issue of abortion, that is the case. That is why I posted this piece by Robert Knight, The Deceitful Road to Abortion, reminding us that whether it's Norma McCorvey, who used to live here in Dallas, she of course gone on to be with the Lord, but became a Christian and revealed that the whole story behind that was false. And Sandra Cano of Doe versus Bolton actually was tricked into signing the statement. So at the very beginning, the cases were deceitful. Of course, the court itself was deceitful by saying, well, we really don't know when life begins. And I've written newspaper columns that have been published and other commentaries and even books talking about all the times in which we could document that life begins at conception, and that was not even controversial. But the court made that decision, and we are now in a situation where you've had a whole generation growing up under a life in which abortion is legal. But Don Blythe with me in studio today. One of the real surprises to, I think, Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Rights League and others is they thought after a generation they would so take for granted that abortion is legal that you would have a really pro-choice millennial generation. And actually, if truth be told, it may be the most pro-life generation in American history. Isn't that interesting?
That's really cool. That means in some areas we're being successful to convince people that abortion is an act of violence that kills a baby versus those who just don't want to hear it. So I'm glad we're having an impact.
Let's talk about some of the successes. One of those that I think always catches people off guard is when I tell people how many babies you have actually saved. And for people that say, well, I'd like to see some documentation, if you're actually watching online here, I'll hold up one of the booklets that you have here, which is, again, from At the Well Ministry, so you can see it right there. But your best estimate, in 35 years of doing this, how many babies have you saved?
Well, over the years, we've tried to keep not a real detailed track of it, but it's been around 4,000.
4,000 babies saved.
It's slowed down because abortion rates have slowed down somewhat, or at least it appears that way. More and more people are taking chemical abortion pills and that kind of thing. But around 4,000. But one of my interns the other day was talking to me about it and said, you don't think about this, but there's probably a lot more than 4,000. And I said, yeah, I've thought about that a little bit. He goes, well, just the other day, a young man saw me in front of the abortion clinic, and he was driving by in his pickup truck, and he was staring at me, and I thought, I wonder what that guy's doing. I thought, oh, maybe a hostile guy angry about me being in front of the clinic. And he spins his truck around, and he comes back.
Yes.
And when he comes back, he says, he gets out of his truck. He says, are you Don? I said, yes, I am. And he said, I just want to thank you. And I said, oh, yeah? And he said, yeah, I want to thank you for being out here a couple years ago. Wow. You talked my wife and I out of an abortion. He said, do you remember me? And I said, a little bit. He was more cleaned up and sharp looking. And he goes, I want you to know, as a result of the birth of this baby, I'm no longer in a gang. I got a good job. And I want you to know the birth of that baby changed my life. And he goes, you were part of that. And I said, listen, you've just made my day, maybe my month. And he goes, one reason I'm glad I saw you today, my wife just gave birth to our second child. And he said, I want you to know the thing that I thought about during the birth of our second child was, if Don and his team had not talked me out of an abortion, I would have aborted both of these children.
Yeah.
And boy, it kind of hit me.
Yeah.
And that's when my friend Matt said, we've actually saved more than 4,000 because people go on to have other children that they probably would have gone on to abort other children.
Yeah.
And so we know there's been over 4,000. And if you go on my website, you can see some of the pictures of some of those babies that we've saved over the years. We don't have 4,000 pictures, but we have a lot of those pictures. And every once in a while, a woman or a couple will drive up in their car when they see us in front of the abortion clinic, and they'll say, hey, hello, I just wanted to talk to you a minute and let you know that, 6 years ago you were out here and I changed my mind, and I didn't talk to you afterwards, but we left and had our child, and she's now a cheerleader at a high school. And so we know 4,000. We're hoping it's much larger than that. One friend of mine, I talked, he and his wife, his girlfriend, his fiance at the time, talked her out of the abortion, and they went on to have 3 more children.
Yes.
So they had 4 children. And I'll never forget when I tried to help him get through it and offer him a lot of solutions. She said, my mother wants to talk to you. And so she put her mom on the phone, and the grandma says, you better come through. If you're going to help my daughter and son-in-law, you better come through. You better be good on this. And I said, no problem. I'll do whatever I can. Our pregnancy help centers are there for you. And she says, well, you better come through. Well, years later, her daughter was kind of embarrassed that her mom kind of chewed me out for talking her out of an abortion. But she says, my mother said, this little boy is the greatest thing that ever happened to our family, and brought our family together. Our family was broken and disjointed, and because of this little boy, our family's now together. So I just said, man, this is a ministry that needs to be done. People need to be out in front of these abortion clinics and just need to be reaching out to these people, offering them the pregnancy help centers that are in your area. And we just need to be there. Somebody once said, you can't have an impact without a collision.
Mm-hmm.
And we always think that, well, we're Christians. We shouldn't be upsetting people. But there's a reason why the Lord said, put on the armor, because we're going to be going to battle. We're going to be colliding with darkness.
Yes.
So, and people don't think that. And so they think, well, boy, you've got people mad at you sometimes at the clinic, and I've been threatened with knives and everything else. And I said, yeah, but the Bible says that's where we're supposed to be. We're to go out there in the battlefield,
Yes.
and you can't have an impact without a collision. So when I collide with the darkness and share with them that Jesus Christ is the answer, and share with them that truth is better than air, things happen. And there's great results.
Yes.
And it's because God says, if you'll go, I'll bring the increase. And so that's what happens when I'm out there. I got time for a real quick. When I first started the ministry, I went and spoke at a pregnancy help center, a fundraiser, and I was kind of surprised why they would pick me. Well, I was this weird guy, who are these people going out in front of abortion clinics? So they wanted to touch me and see who I was, so they had me speak. And when we were done, I was getting ready to drive back home, and I was down in near Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo.
Sure.
And so I was doing the long drive home, and I thought, well, I better get something to eat. So I pulled off, had a quick bite to eat at a restaurant. And I started to go out the door. Well, I better go to the bathroom real quick because I got 4 hours to go. And I went into the bathroom, and I was washing my hands and getting ready to walk out. And a young man comes in who's a worker there at the place, getting ready to clean the bathroom. And as he comes in, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" Well, you and I both know that doesn't mean I'm interested. It's just you're just being nice.
Yeah.
Well, he took it as I'm interested. So he goes, "Oh, I'm terrible, man. I'm just doing terrible." And I thought, no, I don't want to. I don't care. I just want to go home, But I turned around. I said, "Okay, Lord, all right, in and out of season." So I turned around. I looked at him. I said, "So what's bothering you?" And he starts crying, and he says to me, "My girlfriend and I just found out she's pregnant, and we're scared, and we don't know what to do." And I said to the Lord, "Okay, go ahead. Hit me hard." Okay, all right. I felt bad, and so I looked at him. I said, "Young man, you know what I do for a living?" And he goes, "No, what?" And I said, I actually help couples that find themselves pregnant and are scared, and I've got some information for a pregnancy help center, and I can help you." He goes, oh man, thank you. And he just grabs me and bear hugs me.
Bear hugs you.
And I'm thinking, no, this isn't good. and so I just, I said, let me go to the car and I'll get you the information. And I helped that young man and his girlfriend choose life. And just in a random restaurant off the 101 freeway, just being available and ready.
Such opportunities.
With the tools.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about these pregnancy health centers, but we also want to talk about Project Truth and what you can do even on your local college campus. A lot more to cover. By the way, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, or you can sit back and listen to our stories. We'll be right back.
In an age of fake news, getting good information is vital. Point of View works to bring you that each and every day. But as Diane in Arkansas illustrates, passing that information along, educating others, is something you can help with. Diane is a college professor. She influences the next generation, and she wrote, "Thank you for your informative letter. I used some of your quotes when I was teaching the Declaration of Independence in my literature class." Diane, like so many, hopefully like you, is taking what she received from Point of View in letters, online, through our app, on the air, and rebuilding truth in this post-truth culture. All of that takes a team. Join the Truth Team at Point of View. Find out how you can help at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. Show your commitment. Make a difference today, right now. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today about pro-life ministry, and I might just mention for just a minute that, first of all, we have, of course, Don Blythe in studio. We also have a link to @thewellministries.org. You don't even have to remember all that because we have a link. And Don, first of all, let me just mention there's a contact opportunity, and in a few minutes we're going to talk about Project Truth and what you could do on your college campus, or maybe you'd like to have someone come and help you maybe put together sidewalk counseling or speak to a pregnancy center. And you have been so gracious over the years to actually go to those institutions, go to those venues, and you actually pay for it yourself. So talk about what is available if some of our listeners wanted to contact you.
Anyone who wants to contact me and say, hey, come to my hometown and talk to our church or talk to us about that. I don't charge anything. I do this on my own dime. I love the idea of taking people out into a harvest field and saying, look, here's how we do it. Here, come and watch us. I have several videos on my
yes, you do.
webpage, and come and see how we talk to people on the college campuses, how we challenge them, what we use. There's lots of tools available, and then we do on-the-job training. We'll take them out to a college and say, here's what we do, and watch what we do. Or if it's in front of an abortion clinic, sometimes every abortion clinic has its different dynamics. Some of them, it's almost impossible to get near the women.
That's true.
They're parking in the back, but there are certain things we can do to reach those couples. There's one clinic where it's very difficult. I have a sign that says Child Sacrifice Center, and I place that out near the driveway because it's almost impossible to talk to them. And by doing that, when I first got that sign, I thought, well, let me try this. Let me see how it works. Let me see if it's effective. And the first day I had that sign, I had a young man not a young man, he's probably 35 years old or more. He pulls back out with his wife after driving in, and he looks at me, he rolls down the window, he looks at me, he says, I want you to know, mister, that sign right there changed our minds.
Wow.
He goes, I want to thank you. And I thought, okay, this sign will work, and
We'll
he's
use it
not
again.
He's not the only one. I've
That's
had
right.
others who've said that sign is powerful, and I said,
Sacrifice.
so I use it, and it has an arrow pointing, just says Child Sacrifice Center, and it pricks their conscience, which is what we need to get to, and so that's what we do, and then we have pregnancy help centers around the area. And we have their information on a card. I said, all you need to do when I first started doing this, we had no idea what to do. And so we went out and got some information. There's some sidewalk counseling programs out there. There's all different kinds of information you go gather, and then you make that work for your particular situation. And so I'm open for anyone who wants to contact me and say, well, Don, here's our situation, and here's how it works, because now we got 3 different groups out there in front of our clinic. How do we do this? And so we walk through some of the struggles of reaching people in front of abortion clinics. We're blessed because we have a pregnancy help center that moved across the street from Planned Parenthood.
More and more of them are starting to do that.
It's the greatest thing in the world. The Pregnancy Resource Center in Stockton, I love them. And now they have a mobile unit there, too.
Right. More and more are doing that, too.
Right. So that's the ideal, because many women go in there thinking it's Planned Parenthood. And so they get to talk to the women. They say, no, we're not Planned Parenthood, but can I talk to you? And they save babies that way. And so to me, that's the ideal. Get that pregnancy help center as close to an abortion clinic as you can. And so I'm open to anybody who wants to come and hear my story and hear what I do to try to prepare and try to do the best I can in a given situation. I actually, to let people know, if you get the tools in front of you and you read the books and you get the materials you need to be effective in the field. I was leaving, in fact, I was coming back from back east, and I was flying home, and there was a big storm in California that was affecting the air traffic, and we were in Dallas. And transferring on another plane, and our plane was going to be like 3 hours later, and I wanted to go home. So I said, Lord, I know you probably have a divine appointment on this airplane for me, but I'd love to get home sooner. And so I went up to one of the counters and I said, can I use this ticket? Will that plane get me back to Sacramento or San Francisco now instead of 2 hours later? She goes, there's one seat on the airplane that's left. That plane is getting ready to leave. You take it or leave it now. I'll give you this ticket. And I said, I'll take it. I get on the plane. They close the back door. They find me my one seat in this packed airplane. And I sit down and I say, okay, Lord, I got a lady on both sides of me. Maybe I got 2 divine appointments. And the one lady had a heavy accent. I couldn't understand a word she was saying. So I looked over at the other lady and I said, how are you? She goes, fine. And she said, so what do you do for a living? I thought, open door, here we go. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, fasten your seatbelt. And she goes, okay. And first of all, I was shocked because nobody ever asked me that. It's usually me asking them. You probably do the same thing. You're the one that asked first. So I told her what I did for a living. So then I said, so what do you do for a living? And she looks at me and says, fasten your seatbelt. I said, okay. And she said, I sell the abortion pills to abortion clinics. Yes. And I thought, now that's a divine appointment. So for the next 2 hours, she and I had a really good dialogue about this whole issue of abortion and her role in taking the lives of innocent children through chemical abortions. And everybody around us was listening to our dialogue. Don't you know? But that wasn't a coincidence. That was a divine appointment where the Lord had me in that seat that day in the airport. And eventually it works into the gospel. Mm-hmm. Our conversations, our team is geared towards not just speaking out about the evils of abortion, but sharing with people why abortion is bad. It's because people have rejected God and that they've rejected Jesus Christ. So as we get into the gospel, so I share the gospel with her. And as I'm sharing, she stops me. She says, my parents would be so thrilled that you're on the plane with me.
Oh, isn't that something?
I said, why? She goes, you talk like my parents. And she says, she goes, I can't wait to tell my parents who I sat with on the airplane. Couldn't be more opposite people. But she goes, I don't need God. And I don't even fear death. And I said, well, in the struggles that we have, I said, you're going to stand before a God with the blood of those innocent children on your hands. And I said, I don't want that. I want you to be redeemed and forgiven through the blood of Jesus Christ. And she goes, I don't care about dying. I couldn't care one whit about dying. Wow. So we're flying into San Francisco, and it's a wicked storm. Mm-hmm. And the plane looks like it appears to be coming down in this storm, and we're getting buffeted. And the pilot tells us to get ready, because it's bumpy. As we're getting ready to land, something's not right. And at the last second, he pulls up. Mm-hmm. And he goes around. He goes, folks, I didn't like where we were on the runway. We're going to do this again. I thought, what? But as he starts to land and guns it to take off, she grabs me by the arm. Yes. And I just looked, really? You don't fear death? Why are you grabbing on to the Christian sitting next to you? And I think that was God's way of saying, you're not so invincible. Yeah, I know. And so those kind of things happen because we make ourselves available to the Lord, and we say, Lord, I'm going to get the tools. I'm going to get all the skills ready. I'm going to listen to Kerby Anderson and get all the information I need. And I'm going to go out and say, okay, who do you want me to impact? And so that's why I do what I do, because I love serving the Lord, and I love watching him work and watching him produce those divine appointments.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about Project Truth. What can you do on your college campus? And, of course, we've been talking about these pregnancy resource centers as well, and that was something that he suggested you have on a card. And the good news is this one more example of how the pro-life movement is winning the war of ideas. There's probably 3 times as many pregnancy help centers, pregnancy resource centers in the country as there are abortion clinics. And so there is just another tool that has been developed over the years. And if you would like to know more about what Don Blythe is doing, or you'd like to contact him, at the Well Ministries, we have that link on the website. We're going to talk about Project Truth in just a minute. Of course, there's also abortionregrets.com. There's so many other resources, but we'll try to pack all that in before the hour is up. And we're privileged to have Don Blythe in studio today. If you find yourself saying, I'd really like to share this with some people, all you need to do is go to pointofview.net, click on the button that says watch or listen. You can listen to it again. You can download the podcast. In maybe about an hour or so, you could actually go to the YouTube channel and watch it and send it to others. Take the time to pass it on to someone else. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. An editorial penned in the Tampa Bay Times has called for one of our clients to form a league of their own. The author writes about Cambridge Christian School, who earned the chance to play for a state football championship game against another Christian school. Both teams asked the Florida High School Athletic Association to pray over the public address system prior to kickoff. That request was denied by the FHSAA specifically because the requested speech was religious in nature. The author supports the FHSAA. He writes, if Cambridge and similar schools want public community prayer before their state championship games, they should leave the FHSAA and form their own private statewide Christian association and stage their own playoffs. Now, we were once told that if you wanted to pray in school, you should go to a private Christian school. These students did, but now that they are there, this author would have them leave the league entirely. Well, where does it end? Must religious picnickers form their own private parks lest they be accused of violating the Constitution for saying grace over their meal at a public park? It was the FHSAA that engaged in religious discrimination against Cambridge Christian School. It would be an even greater offense to the Constitution's protection of religious liberty to force these students further from public participation. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Tom Blythe in studio with us for a few more minutes, again, at the Well Ministries. And one of the other opportunities that I wanted to talk about before we run out of time is Project Truth. And this is where you go on to college campuses and really engage the students. And I would like to, first of all, challenge all of our listeners to consider whether or not there is a college campus near them or a high school campus near them where they could actually have an opportunity to share. Now, there are obviously limitations on a high school campus. There are oftentimes limitations at a private college. But you probably have all sorts of places where you could really begin to educate the next generation. Talk about what you're doing right now.
About 10 years ago, we started a program called Project Truth. And my niece and a group called Survivors, they kind of inspired us to do that. And so we started Project Truth, where we go onto college campuses, and there's over 80 colleges in Northern and Central California. And we started going onto the college campus with a display and brochures and information. We have an excellent brochure called Unlocking the Truth, which we use specifically on the college campuses. And we started handing those out. And we set up right in the quad, set right up at UC Berkeley, right there where the riots were.
Sure.
We set up right there, and we engage students and we talk to them. And we do all the colleges in Central and Northern California. We've done some in Idaho, Utah, Nevada, UNLV. We've done all those, Las Vegas, UNLV, and then UNR in Reno. And we do all these colleges. We try to do them every 2 years, but we go for 2 days on the college campus, and we hand out literature and engage students in dialogue and debate. And we have been able to have an incredible impact on these colleges. The professors will sometimes say to us, boy, you've really disrupted our school. We can't teach our classes. We have to debate the issue of abortion because you guys got everybody talking about it. And it has been phenomenal. It is an incredible, and I was thinking, why weren't we doing this 30 years ago, taking a group of Christian people and going onto the campus, setting up our banners? Psalm says we will set up our banners because of the Lord. And so set up our banners and talk to students. They want to dialogue, especially when they say, oh, look, conservatives, and they want to talk to us. And so we set up on the campuses and talk to students. We were on the Modesto JC campus, and a woman was walking by, and I said, what do you think of our display, pro-life display? And she goes, oh, I've seen it before, Dawn. And I went, okay, how do you know me? And I looked at her, I said, how do I know you? She goes, don't you remember me? I used to work at the Modesto abortion clinic where they do abortions to 6 months. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember you going into work there. And she goes, yes. And I said, well, I haven't seen you there for a while. She goes, no, I quit. And I said, well, what made you quit? And she said, I got tired of seeing abortions of babies with hair on their heads. And I said, really? She goes, yeah. She goes, that's what made me quit.
Isn't that something?
She goes, I never forgot you. And I said, sometimes I preached hard to you, but you knew I cared about you. She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, but I'll never forget some of the things you said to me because it had an impact on me. She goes, one thing you used to say to me when I'd go into work is you'd say, do you realize that your paychecks are stained in blood?
Wow.
And she goes, I never forgot that. One former worker actually told me that when I told her that, when she got her first check, she quit. She took the check to her mother and said, I can't cash this. I can't have this money. And her mother said, why? She says, because it's stained in blood. And so we got to talk. I got to share the gospel with her and witness to her. I said, what are you studying for now that you're in college? What are you studying? She said, I'm going to be a neonatal nurse.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? And
so now we're on a college campus, reaching these college students, challenging them. One of the college students had a sign to protest us, and it said, my uterus is not an incubator. So I walked up to her and I said, I got a question for you. And she goes, okay. I said, your sign says my uterus is not an incubator. I said, my question would be, what is a uterus? And she and her friends kind of made some smart aleck remark. And I said, no, I'm serious. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I just like to know, because I'd like to understand you a little bit better. What is a uterus? If your uterus isn't an incubator, what is it? And she kind of hem-haws on because she's struggling a little bit. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a place. It's a place where the baby goes. And I looked at her and I just smiled and I said, so what is that place? And she looks at me, defeated, and she looks at me, and I wasn't being mean, but she looked at me and goes, well, maybe it is an incubator. And I said, I think you're right. It is an incubator. I said, so maybe you shouldn't be holding that sign anymore. She goes, well, we're trying to make a point. I said, yeah, but that wouldn't be the point, because God created that as an incubator, the most incredible place for many in their body that God did, and he created it that way. And you know what? Throughout the day, she and I got to have more conversation and talk about why we don't think it should be a right to destroy a little human being inside the womb in the incubator. And so we go on college campuses. We have college professors invite us sometimes to come into the classroom and give our presentation.
Yes.
I had a college professor at Delta College who invited me in, and he had me speak to like 150 students. Afterwards, a young lady walks up and she goes, my teacher told us Don Blythe was going to be speaking on abortion, so get ready for the class. And so I told my mom, there's this guy, a pro-life guy, he's going to be speaking. And my mother looked at me and said, you need to go up and meet him after the presentation. And she said, why? She goes, because Don Blythe saved your life. And she goes, so I just wanted to meet you. I gave her a hug in the middle of my tears, and I gave her a hug and I said, thank you for coming up. She goes, no, thank you. I said, what are you doing now with your life? And she said, I'm going to a Christian college after Delta. I'm going to a Christian college where I'm going to go into nursing. And she goes, I want to thank you for being out there for my mom.
What great stories.
And that's on college campuses. These students are open to us, and we need to be there. That's a great, great place for Christians to be, and challenging students in that marketplace.
Well, it's one of the places I spent a lot of my time before I was doing this show, speaking on college campuses, doing some of those debates and those presentations. And I really encourage all of you listening today to consider what you might do in your Jerusalem and your Samaria and your uttermost parts of the world. But certainly just think about what is happening in your community and how you can have a pro-life testimony in that community. It could be sidewalk counseling. It could be pregnancy resource centers. It could be a Project Truth type of outreach on the college campus or the high school campus. Consider what you might do to stand for life. And Don, it's just always so fun to be with you. And thank you for giving us an hour of your time today in Texas. And I think the next time you're here, we need to come back and do part 2. What do you think?
I would love to. I've enjoyed this thoroughly. And thank you for being who you are. And thank you for being who you are in Christ, because I thank the Lord for you all the time.
Well, I do for you as well. At the Well Ministries, if you would like no more information, it is available on the website, pointofview.net. If you find yourself saying, I'd like to hear this again, or I'd like to pass it on to someone else, we've made it very easy for you to download a podcast and then share it. You can go to the YouTube channel or even go to the Facebook Live post and send it to someone else. Maximize the impact of this wonderful interview. We need to take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Going to get back into the news story, but let me finish off some of the conversation we had in the first hour. You might, if you are just joining us, not know that we had Don Blythe in studio, and if you have not had a chance to hear that interview, let me encourage you to do so. Just some powerful stories from Don Blythe at the Well Ministries. We have a link there, and if you have not listened to it, there's an opportunity for you to download the podcast or to watch it again, or even to go to Facebook Live or to go to the YouTube channel. There's a lot of different ways you can watch or hear that. And as you do so, I think it will be really encouraging to you if you're pro-life. And at the same time, it might be something that you would like to pass on to others. We'll get to some of the testimony today by the Homeland Security Secretary, which all kind of ties into, did the president use those words or didn't he use those words when he talked about some of those countries? And I think what we found out today from the Homeland Security Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, is there are all sorts of people using profanity, which brings me back to something I'll say a little bit later, and that is we all benefited this time last week when the cameras came in to actually first photograph a few things happening around Donald Trump, Republican leaders and Democratic leaders, but he allowed the cameras to stay. And the first thing, of course, what we learned was, guess what? Members of Congress actually play before the camera. No surprise there. We also learned something else. Members of Congress and the president aren't very good listeners either. There were all sorts of times when somebody said, no, he didn't say that. No, she said that. No, she didn't say that. Oh, boy. Well, now we're finding out that in that closed-door meeting, there are all sorts of people that said that Donald Trump used certain kinds of words. Now we're finding out from the Homeland Security Secretary, all sorts of other people use some pretty awful words. Maybe it's time to put those cameras back in there and have everybody clean up their language. But we'll get to that in just a minute, because two of the articles that are related to what we talked about in the first hour are, first of all, one by Robert Knight. It is entitled The Deceitful Road to Abortion. Might get him on later to talk about this, but it, I think, is just a reminder that next week when we have the 45th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, which legalized abortion effectively by striking down the various state restrictions on abortion, that the two cases, Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, were both based upon fiction. That is, Norma McCorvey, who later became a Christian, lived here in the Dallas area until she died recently, revealed that she had not been gang raped, and actually this was not even an issue of abortion. Sandra Cano, who is the one of Doe versus Bolton, said her attorneys tricked her into signing a statement seeking an abortion, something she says she did not want. And, of course, these were revealed in subsequent testimony, but nothing ever changed after that. And, of course, then he goes on to say one of the biggest deceptions was the so-called right to privacy. Now, that was developed actually in previous Supreme Court decisions having to do with the issue of contraception. Griswold versus Connecticut, that happened back in 1965. But it sort of set the stage to eventually have this legalization of abortion in 1973. As I point out, there are a lot of other deceits that are not in this article. One, of course, is that we will not decide when life begins, and said that there's a lot of conflicting information. And I've written commentaries about this. I have material in my book, even in the section on abortion, on Christian ethics in plain language and others, documenting all sorts of legal documents, United Nations documents, medical documents, textbooks, and others saying always the same thing. Life begins at conception. We know that, but nevertheless, the Supreme Court decided not to decide and basically open the doors for abortion. The second article we've posted is by John Smerick, and he sort of used that yesterday to tie into Martin Luther King Day yesterday and the issue of abortion, or Sanctity of Life Sunday, coming up this Sunday, and that is what pro-lifers can and can't learn from the civil rights movement. And it was just a reminder that one of the reasons that Martin Luther King Jr. was so successful, one of the reasons why you had all of the individuals associated with the civil rights movement were so successful, is because it was able to prick the conscience of America. When individuals, for example, were able to see how those people marching for civil rights were being treated, fire hoses, police dogs, just getting jailed for ridiculous reasons, and on and on and on, because the American people still had sort of a Christian consensus that nonviolence and using a Christian conscience was successful. What John Smerick points out is that Operation Rescue wanted to use some of the same kind of ideas. And, of course, we've just in the last hour heard from Don Blythe wanting to use those same ideas, to stand out in a nonviolent way in front of abortion clinics and really testify to life. But the reason he says that they failed, and I wouldn't say they failed, that maybe is too strong a word, but weren't as successful as the civil rights movement, was twofold. Number one, the media wouldn't cover it. It's almost because so many people in the media are so-called pro-choice or pro-abortion, they wouldn't cover it. It would be like the lack of coverage that the civil rights movement didn't get in the South because you had segregationists that wouldn't cover what was happening to Martin Luther King Jr. and others. It's like in a national way, because so few pro-lifers exist in the national media, there wasn't any coverage, and he gives all sorts of examples of brutal tactics that were used against pro-life people outside of clinics and these kinds of things. So the first thing is it didn't work because there wasn't a lot of coverage, although now because of social media, you can do an end run around that, and because of alternative media like Point of View, we can do an end run. But the second part is there's sort of a lack of Christian consensus. Now you have a lot of people that say, well, those pro-lifers, they got what they deserved. And so it has been a change both in the media culture and it's been a change in our society, which means that today, if we had a civil rights movement and you had a lot of people that controlled the media and didn't believe in civil rights, and because you have a culture that isn't quite as Christian and doesn't so much believe in civility, maybe it wouldn't have worked as well. But Martin Luther King Jr. certainly understood that. Last Monday, I've always suggested people read the letter from Birmingham jail and all of the rest, but those are just a couple of points to make. And my commentary coming out next week, I just want to talk about the fact that many of us see the real scar that abortion has left on the nation. You know, we see the evidence of those scars when even today, we can open up the phones and hear from women who've been exploited by abortion. And we see the scars when we see some of these cavalier comments from some of the students, some of which Don was sharing with us the last hour about human life. And we see those scars when we see how people debate issues like, stem cell research and physician-assisted suicide and the rest. And so there are some real scars that need to heal, but much of that healing will not happen until Roe versus Wade is overturned, until abortion is once again outlawed. But I hope we also gave you reasons to be encouraged to hear many of the stories of, in this case, 4,000 babies being saved, the stories of now 3 times as many pregnancy help centers in the country as there are abortion clinics. There are some reasons to celebrate the sanctity of human life, and I hope that you will do so in your church this Sunday. Let's take a break, though. We'll come back and get into this whole debate about immigration. Along the way, if you'd like to speak to the issue of abortion, sanctity of life, or immigration, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, with all this talk about fake news, you might think that this is a recent phenomenon. Jared Stettman provides a history of fake news in the United States and the attempts government and other entities have used to try to stop it. He reminds us that the Founding Fathers were well aware of the power of the press. Many of them, such as Samuel Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Paine, were newspapermen and pamphleteers. That is why they were all high on King George III's enemies list. 3 years after the Constitution was ratified, Congress added the Bill of Rights that included the First Amendment that provides protections for the press. They understood the power of the press. Benjamin Franklin explained that the press acted as a court of public opinion and wielded great power. But Thomas Jefferson also argued that the most effectual way for a people to be governed by reason and truth is to give freedom to the press. You know, early attempts to suppress fake news or unpopular opinions did not go well. The Federalist Party, for example, passed the infamous Alien and Sedition Acts under President John Adams in order to clamp down on false writing. It became so unpopular that the party was crushed in future elections and ceased to exist as a party. Now, there's a lesson for the Big Four tech masters in Silicon Valley, which I wrote about last month. For some time, they've argued that they were merely a platform and have no responsibility to evaluate what is posted on their sites. Now, some of them, like Facebook and Google, want to develop a way to fact-check stories and to limit the amount of fake news on the Internet. The founders gave us a free press unhindered by a government oversight that could censor or even modify news and information. Instead, they encouraged all of us to read widely and check out the facts. That is still the best approach for today. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we have testimony in front of the Senate today with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and it was a heated debate, but instead of focusing time and attention on immigration, and eventually they got there, it was almost exclusively about what Donald Trump said or did not say in the meeting. And what I thought was so striking is that the Secretary of Homeland Security actually went back and forth with some of those individuals, in particular Dick Durbin, about whether or not President Trump said those blank countries. Now, the first thing we have to say is whether he said them or not, there have been phrases that have been used like that in the past. And I even posted yesterday a piece by Ed Stetzer that was in the Washington Post entitled, "Evangelicals, Please Let Trump's Tough Language Shock You," in which he was really calling for some of the evangelical advisors, some of whom we've had on this program here, to talk to Donald Trump and to say, look, this is not acceptable. Okay, got that. But what I thought was even more interesting in the back and forth today, and this comes from The Hill, is, of course, these remarks set up a firestorm, and I'm wondering now whether or not we're going to have any kind of legislation related to DACA. DACA, again, stands for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. But interestingly enough, she said, the Homeland Security Secretary said, I don't remember the specific words that Donald Trump used. What I was struck with, frankly, as I'm sure you were as well, was the general profanity that was used in a room by almost everyone. Now, I won't point fingers, although she gave a few examples of people. She didn't give examples of the words. But it illustrates a point that I have made even in this particular
conversation last week, and that is when we got together on our Wednesday Millennial Roundtable after the Tuesday meeting last week. So this all just happened a week ago. You had, of course, the president, and you had some of his advisors. You had Democratic leaders, and you had Republican leaders in the same room. And they started talking about kind of setting the ground rules for the debate about DACA, as well as immigration, and the desire for, on the part of Donald Trump and most of the Republican leadership, to link it to some other things, funding for the wall, E-Verify, no-chain migration, whatever it might be. And because Donald Trump chose to leave the cameras running, we got to see, as we oftentimes say, how sausage is made. You know, they always talk about the way they make bills is sausage making, and we got to see kind of the back and forth. And as I mentioned just about a little bit in the first hour, but let me mention it again, we got to see a whole lot of things that were happening. And that is, first of all, that some of these individuals were posturing. Well, no surprise there. There's cameras. Anytime a camera's on, sometimes the most dangerous place to be is between a member of Congress and a camera. So I got that. No surprise there. And sometimes it takes longer to get something done when the cameras are on. But we did see some real benefits over the years with C-SPAN. And so that's number one. Number two, we also learned that these members of Congress don't listen very well. I mean, there were, I think, agreements made around the table that a few minutes later people said, no, we didn't decide that. Or later they'd come out of the meeting and say we didn't decide that. And I thought, no wonder we're having so much problem in Congress. These people are real good at talking and not very good at listening. But there is a positive of all this as well. I guarantee you, if those cameras are running, some of the kind of language that was used in this meeting, which only a few people attended, probably would not take place. And if somebody did use inappropriate language, we would know about it, and we wouldn't have to have this back and forth between the senior senator in Illinois and the Secretary of Homeland Security. Because when it's all said and done, we may not like the language that certain members of Congress use. We may not like the language the president uses, and we should certainly express our concerns about that. And so I agree with Ed Stetzer. Let's have some of these evangelical advisors maybe speak to the president and to the vice president about those issues. But what affects you and me day to day is the kind of policies they pass. So I'm going to move on in just a minute, but I thought since I found a very good piece by Dennis Prager, who's been on the program with us before, he has 10 thoughts on the president and the blank countries. I'm only going to summarize it, and you can read it for yourself. But he said, first of all, this is no surprise, there are few filters between President Donald Trump's mind and mouth. This is his appeal and his weakness. It's very common that a person's strengths are also his weaknesses. He says, I wish Trump's tweets and comments were as forthright and as un-PC as they are now, but stated in a sophisticated way. So, first of all, rough and tumble, no surprise there. Number two, he says, as a rule, the President of the United States should not label countries, let alone continents, as, you know, what the word is. I don't know what word the President actually used, but had he used the word dysfunctional, that actually might have been a service to the people of many of these countries. Dennis Prager said, I've been to 20 African countries. Corruption in Africa is the greatest single problem. That's why those who truly care about Africans, many of whom are terrific people, need to honestly describe the moral state of many or most African countries. Number three, though many wonderful immigrants come from the world's worst places, there is some connection between the moral state of an immigrant's country and the immigrant's contribution to America. According to data from the Center for Immigration Studies, 73% of households headed by Central American and Mexican immigrants use one or more welfare programs, as do 51% of Caribbean immigrants and 48% of African immigrants. Contrast that with 32% of East Asians and 26% of Europeans. Number four, the press constant description, he says, of Donald Trump as a racist, a white supremacist, a fascist, an anti-Semite, has been the big lie. It's meant to hurt the president, but it mostly damages the country and the media to cite the most often provided evidence for the president's racism. The president never said or implied that the neo-Nazis at the infamous Charlottesville, Virginia demonstrations were fine people. The fine people he referred to were the pro- and anti-statue removal demonstrators. Number five, why are the left's repeated descriptions of America as systematic racist not the moral equivalent of the word that Donald Trump supposedly uses? And he says the left's description of America and its white majority are at least as offensive, less true, and not made in private or semi-private conversations, but in the open. And matter of fact, he points out sometimes in college classes. Number 6, the poor choice of language notwithstanding, can any country be described as this? As Ben Shapiro, a never-Trumper, wrote, the argument that Trump is wrong to call some countries these comes down to nicety, not truth, which is why Rich Lowry of National Review took Joan Walsh of CNN to the woodshed over whether she'd rather live in Haiti or Norway. Because, again, that was the issue. You know, by the way, he said Norway and Asian countries, and that never got reported either. That's why it's maybe better to have played a recording or had some video or the rest. But, again, she wouldn't even answer the question. A couple more real quickly. Number 7, the president allows himself to speak openly to Democrats whose overriding ambition is to undo his election. He says that's a testimony to his self-confidence and his naivete. Number 8, what people say in private is neither my business nor my concern. That's why I wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal in the 1990s defending Hillary Clinton against charges of anti-Semitism for allegedly directing an expletive-filled anti-Jewish comment in private against a Jewish campaign official she felt was responsible for Bill Clinton's lost congressional race. The point he makes is sometimes private speech tells you who it is, but if indeed private speech will mean nothing about the people, and when you don't have the context, well, we know the rest of the story. Number 9, the Washington Post reports that the president also said he would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries. That would seem to invalidate the racist charge, which I just mentioned a minute ago, that never really got reported by most of the media. And number 10, the left has lost all credibility in using the term racist. He says the University of California lists it as an example of a microaggression, the statement, there's only one race, the human race. The left labels anyone who opposes race-based quotas or an all-black college dorms or Black Lives Matter racist. And, of course, the bigger issue that I've said before, when everybody's a racist, nobody's a racist. If everybody's a Nazi, nobody's a Nazi. Somewhere along the line, words have meanings. And, again, if there are real racists out there, and there are, I think we've all met somebody where we just go, boy, that guy is really racist. They deserve the term. But when you label anybody you dislike as a racist, same kind of thing. Yes, there was a Nazi regime, and there are people today that idolize Nazis. And when they certainly are conflated with everybody else that you disagree with, the words just simply lose their meaning. So nothing else. That's a Dennis Prager piece, and I'm not going to spend any more time on it. We'll have this back and forth for days about what the president said or didn't say. But what affects you is immigration policy. We're going to keep our eyes on that as well. Let's open up for some phone calls, though. I've been doing a lot of talking and not a chance to listen. So I see some calls starting to come in. So if you'd like to join us, let's have an open line in the last half hour. Anything we've talked about so far, tough language, immigration, abortion, pro-life. If you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Also have a little bit to say about my commentary today and a few other pieces of information that might be helpful to you. It's all available at the website, pointofview.net. We'll take your calls right after this.
In an age of fake news, getting good information is vital. Point of View works to bring you that each and every day. But as Diane in Arkansas illustrates, passing that information along, educating others, is something you can help with. Diane is a college professor. She influences the next generation, and she wrote, "Thank you for your informative letter. I used some of your quotes when I was teaching the Declaration of Independence in my literature class." Diane, like so many, hopefully like you, is taking what she received from Point of View in letters, online, through our app, on the air, and rebuilding truth in this post-truth culture. All of that takes a team. Join the truth team at Point of View. Find out how you can help at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. Show your commitment. Make a difference today, right now. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Well, if ever you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. I can see on my screen here that some of you want to speak to this issue of what Donald Trump said or didn't say, which seemed to have just dominated a fairly significant amount of time when the Homeland Security Secretary would probably have liked to talk about something other than what Donald Trump did or did not say, whether or not Dick Durbin, Senator Durbin, agreed or disagreed or was able to recall that or not. So certainly some of you want to address that issue. And I've really kind of avoided it because I don't think it's the biggest issue, but certainly the mainstream media thinks it is. I've also posted a couple of articles on the subject of abortion. Robert Knight's piece, The Deceitful Road to Abortion, one by John Smirek on what pro-lifers can and can't learn. See, some of you want to speak to that issue and maybe share a pro-life example, and we would welcome that as well. Of course, Don Blythe was with us in the first hour talking about sidewalk counseling and a reach out through the various universities and colleges through Project Truth. So, again, almost a full bank of phone calls. We'll work through them as quickly as we can, and we'll go first to KNEO in Missouri. Mike, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Yes, thank you. The guy said I had two opinions, I guess, but one on Trump. I just think they look at anything that they can make news out of. And if he did say it, you know, it might not have been right, but it was off the cuff. It wasn't a public comment. And, you know, I just don't see the issue why they want to blow that up. Yeah, I you know, probably sometime in my life I made a comment, and even if I'd heard him say it, you know, I would have blown it off right there. I don't think it was an issue at all. I think they're trying to make an issue out of it.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, on the abortion issue, is I'm totally against it. My family was. It almost broke my family up back in the, I guess I was one of the late children, but there was a family member that she had an abortion. My dad didn't want her to have it. It was his sister, and his parents wanted him to take her, and he refused. They got another brother, which almost cost them the thing, but my point is, can we legislate morality? Let's say it's illegal again, like it was then. Will this open up butcher shops in your garage, people's garages and stuff like that?
Yeah, and again, my hope is that if indeed there's ever a case that goes before the Supreme Court that has a chance of overturning Roe versus Wade, first of all, what would happen is all it would do is return it back to the states, and so some states would have more liberal abortion laws than others. And I think we also are in a situation where you have many more alternatives, these pregnancy help centers. So that's kind of where we are, but it's worth a discussion. And next week, of course, is the 45th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, so it's probably a discussion we'll postpone till next week to see what we could possibly talk about. It's only a hypothetical right now because I don't see the votes on the court, but it's something to think about, because if indeed Donald Trump has a chance to appoint one or two more justices, maybe Roe versus Wade ceases to exist or gets overturned. So we'll see where that plays out. Let's go on to another caller in Georgia on the Good News Network. Jane, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Well, Mr. Anderson, I do respect your knowledge and wisdom on a lot of issues, but when you say that it's other networks, it's Christian radio that has talked, I think, more about what the Trump said or didn't say, and I'm tired of it. I'm frustrated that y'all would take up so much time on it. Like the previous caller said, I think it's ridiculous that y'all would spend so much time on this issue, and Christian radio has certainly done its part. You know, and so that's my comment, and thank you for taking my call.
Well, I appreciate your phone call. And again, like I said, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but this is one that just surfaces again today in the Senate hearings. And I just thought, really, this is a Secretary of Homeland Security. We have an opportunity to really move ahead on this issue of immigration, and almost all the conversation today, at least initially, and again, a lot of that goes back to Dick Durbin and a few of the others, Lindsey Graham. So again, I won't take up any more time because we're going to move on to the issue of abortion. So, Rhonda in California, KYCC, I think you want to share with us. Rhonda, you on the air?
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it very much. I am moved deeply about that topic. I am a mother of 9, and I'm actually a single mom. Most of my children are grown now, but I have a 9, 11, and 12-year-old. I'm about to be turning 53, so I obviously had children in my 40s, and the doctors and everyone said what a high risk I was. Also, I have a rare blood type, which made it another high risk, and I've had from child number 1, I had a slew of people that would surround me telling me about abortion, that I wasn't prepared because I was a young mom the first time at the age 19, and they didn't think I would be able to handle motherhood, that I was too young, and 1,000 different reasons why they felt that I should abort the baby. And every child that I've had since then, I've had people come to me talking about, well, you should get an abortion because, you know, you have enough children, and just 1,000 different reasons why people would try to encourage it. And with each time, I recall having the battle within me thinking, well, maybe they're right and I'm wrong. And I would go into prayer. When I was a young mom, I wasn't a devout Christian like I am now, sold out for Christ. But I still knew the Lord, and I knew what life and death were. And I believed with all my heart that at conception that was the hand of God that was involved. And I'm hoping that maybe my voice out here today might stop somebody who's afraid of being a single mom or afraid that they cannot afford, because that's one of the biggest things everyone always says, you can't afford a child or another child. The Lord himself is our provider, even when we don't even know it, because I didn't always realize or know that the Lord would provide. But all of my children have all been well provided for. I've gone through homelessness, but my children were always provided for. The Lord provided work for me to do. I had no work. I was in Texas. I didn't know anyone there. I had 3 very young children at the time and no work. And I asked the Lord to give me a creative idea and seed to sow, and I told him I'd trust him for the harvest. And with that prayer, the Lord quickly responded, and I began making jewelry. 9 years later almost, I'm a jewelry designer. I've been published on 2 separate occasions.
Very good.
I've been able to, for 9 years, support my 3 children on selling jewelry, bookmarks, and keychains that I myself make. And the Lord has never allowed us to go with one day without food, clothing, shoes. My children are children. They want toys. I've been blessed in so many ways I can't even begin to tell you. I've had homes even blessed to us before. Right now we're even currently, we're in a motel. I've been in a motel for a few months now, but the Lord has supplied our needs every step of the way. I started doing Uber, and I was able to get another car because of it, and I let my grown daughter use the minivan that I had, which was blessed to me, and I've been able to maintain a living to support me and my children off of driving for Uber and jewelry.
Well, I've got to come to a break, but I love your testimony. I've unfortunately have one of those mandatory breaks, but you're just a perfect testimony, Rhonda, to the fact that if you trust in the Lord and just take it day by day and see how the Lord will lead, he'll provide for the fact that you have 9 children. So I just think it's an incredible testimony.
It is. And never to fear. What is it? Fear is, I know you've heard it, false expectation appearing real.
Yes. Well, Rhonda, we really appreciate it. I'm coming to a break here, and it's one of those stories that I wish I had a little more time for, but I got a break. And just as she was talking about that, I was thinking, here's another example. Most of you probably know Fixer Upper, Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? She announced that she was pregnant again. And did you see the firestorm of saying, you're bringing another child into the world? I mean, even we're not talking about 9 children there in Chip and Joanna Gaines, but instead just the announcement of a child brings some of these trolls out to complain about you're overpopulating the planet. So you can see what Rhonda's faced. Anybody that has more than what is seen as a respectable number of children gets vilified very quickly in social media. We need to take a break, though. We have quite a number of the rest of you that would like to address our conversation, and we have a full bank of phone calls, so we'll get to those right after these important messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. An editorial penned in the Tampa Bay Times has called for one of our clients to form a league of their own. The author writes about Cambridge Christian School, who earned the chance to play for a state football championship game against another Christian school. Both teams asked the Florida High School Athletic Association to pray over the public address system prior to kickoff. That request was denied by the FHSAA, specifically because the requested speech was religious in nature. The author supports the FHSAA. He writes, if Cambridge and similar schools want public community prayer before their state championship games, They should leave the FHSAA and form their own private statewide Christian association and stage their own playoffs. Now, we were once told that if you wanted to pray in school, you should go to a private Christian school. These students did, but now that they are there, this author would have them leave the league entirely. Well, where does it end? Must religious picnickers form their own private parks lest they be accused of violating the Constitution for saying grace over their meal at a public park? It was the FHSAA that engaged in religious discrimination against Cambridge Christian School. It would be an even greater offense to the Constitution's protection of religious liberty to force these students further from public participation. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join a conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head to the state of Texas, KCTA. Loretta, I think is how you pronounce your name. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Hi, y'all. That was close enough. It's Lorelda, Mom.
Lorelda. Okay, thank you. Lorelda, I guess
thank
that's
you for standing for the truth.
Yes, thank you.
It's getting so hard, and that was part of the reason I called in. I've heard you jump around a little bit today. But the man that answered, I explained to him I'm a substitute teacher, and in the public school system, it's getting harder and harder to stand up for Jesus.
Wow.
But when the children give me a chance, I tell them, try to keep it kind of simple, not to be disrespectful, but like I'll say, have you checked your owner's manual today? And they say, what? I said, don't let the title on the book fool you. It'll say Holy Bible, but that's your owner's manual. And I said, the best way to understand it is to know the author, but don't let that keep you away from checking out the owner's manual. And, of course, for high schoolers, sometimes they think they know more than you. They won't always go there. But I say, Lord, I just hope that I've given them a little bit of a truth that they will want to investigate.
Well, that is very good. Lorelda, I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. I couldn't read it on the screen here.
That's okay.
Maybe I need glasses now. But anyway, I was just thank you for having that kind of testimony there in the schools. That's just outstanding.
Well, I'm just thankful for the opportunity, Kerby. If I may be saying that respectfully, I'm probably a little older than you. I have a few hash marks. Because they need to hear the truth. And I say, Lord, when I'm substituting, if I can't show them or teach them another thing, I want to give them a life lesson, something that they can use when they leave this classroom.
Well, again, you're having a great testimony in their lives, so thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to, in this case, we'll go to Indiana. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What would you like to add to our conversation?
Well, I just want to say if we don't speak up for the weakest members of society, that being the unborn, do not be surprised when people do not speak up for you. I was recently divorced. My ex, I found a video spy pen camera thing in the bathroom, and he was on film setting it up, and we went to court, and he took the fifth. But despite all that, I was accused of alienating my son, who was then 12. And after a year of not being allowed to contact him every other week or go to his extracurricular activities, I can't find anyone to help us. And my son keeps saying, Mom, why doesn't anyone listen to us? But our society calls evil good and good evil. And so, again, I think when, and unfortunately now I understand that this is happening all over the United States. Any protective parent that tries to protect their child from evil, that child is taken from them, and more often they're not given to the abusive parent. It's called parental alienation syndrome. Richard Gardner, who is an evil man, coined that term. He committed suicide. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Anyone contemplating divorce needs to read Worst Interest of the Child so this doesn't happen to them. But I'm just saying the main thing is that it was like Hitler's times. If people didn't speak up for the Jew, eventually they suffered, and we shouldn't be surprised because of our silence. I've always been pro-life, but I don't think I've been as vocal as I should, and now I've been really convicted that no one speaks up for those children often and helps them. So why should I be surprised that no one is helping me?
Right. Good point. And again, if you did not have a chance to hear Don Blythe in the first hour, I just know that will really be encouraging to you. One of our staff members came in and said, you got to stop making us cry here, because he was such a great storyteller. And I think this is just, again, a challenge for all of us as we get closer to the 45th anniversary of Roe versus Wade to stand for life. And if we can't defend the weakest elements, eventually they're coming in our direction. And in that regard, I wanted to jump over to Arizona. Trina, KNLB, I believe you're a mother of a special needs child. Tell us a little bit more, if you might.
Yes, my daughter is autistic. She's on the severe end of the autism spectrum, which means she's nonverbal.
Yes.
But I went through a lot just to have her. And I think they had at one point in time told me that they were going to take the baby because I had had a car accident when I was pregnant with her. And she's just an amazing gift from God. I've had endometriosis, so I was only able to have one child. But I am so grateful I have her. And I was thinking on the abortion issue, what if these people have an abortion one time, and that's the only time they ever have a child?
Yes, that's what has crossed my mind. I mean, even when he was talking about that, I thought, that other woman just probably could have thought about that, because there are complications. There are emotional complications. We've talked about, of course, women exploited by abortion, but there are physical complications. And what if the only child you will ever bear is the one you aborted? And we've had so many women calling in that have regretted those decisions that were made, or in many cases forced upon them. And Trina, I wish we had a little more time, because that's a story we want to hear, but we'll probably do some other programs where we talk about what we can do for special needs children, and also how, if we look at this from a, if you will, an eternal perspective, whether it's a Down's child, a child that's autistic, whatever it might be, these are, in some cases, in previous generations, almost seen as blessings. And now, of course, with this quality of life standard that our secular culture is forced on us, they're seen as burdens. And so I really appreciate you, and let me encourage our callers and our listeners to pray for Trina and her special needs child. And I'll just only have time for maybe one more phone call. So we'll head to Missouri again, KTTK this time. And Debbie, what would you like to finish off our conversation with today?
Well, first of all, I love you. I love your show. And I just have a comment about the verbiage that President Trump either said or didn't say. And if he did, okay, so that he's not real good with verbiage. But he wasn't talking about the people, per se, as their culture. He was talking about, letting people in that we have to take care of. And we have a hard enough time taking care of the people that we have here. And so for them, the far left, to accuse him of being racist is absolutely ridiculous, because President Clinton said the same thing about the illegals coming in, and nobody raised an eyebrow about that. So, it's just another Trump-bashing situation, and I firmly agree that if we're going to let people in, they should come in like they did back in the 30s and the 40s, legally, and, work and get an education without us having to pay for it.
Sure.
I mean, nobody paid for my education.
Well, and again, that's what I would say, whether it's assimilation or whether it's sponsorship. And again, if people in churches complain about this, well, then have your church step forward and just a good illustration of what we can do. And maybe there's a lesson we can learn here, if nothing else. I don't know what the president said, but I do know that Jesus one time, speaking to the Pharisees, said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So maybe we need to check our heart if our language isn't there. And certainly think the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 4:29, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Maybe, if nothing else, we can learn a vicarious lesson about this as well. Well, we're just about out of time. Tomorrow, of course, is our Millennial Roundtable, but let me just mention, first of all, my commentary today on the history of fake news, tomorrow, fake news studies, so you might want to look at that. We also, of course, in the first hour, had an opportunity to talk with Don Blythe. It's an interview you'll want to hear, so we've made it possible for you to download the podcast or to watch it either on the YouTube channel or on Facebook Live. And I know that will be an encouragement to you, and I hope that you'll pass it on to others. We've posted a couple of articles on abortion that you can read and then maybe pass on. Put them on your Facebook page and start a conversation. Who knows what will develop from that. So again, this has been a great program today. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. See you back here tomorrow on our Millennial Roundtable.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make